What if science fiction didn't just predict the future? What if it actually created it? Today we're talking about how post-World War II science fiction shaped the way we think about nuclear war, AI, and autonomous weapons before any of these even existed. My guest is Matt, also known as Feral Historian. That's his YouTube channel. We're looking at the feedback loop between imagination and reality. Arthur C. Clarke predicted the defense industry's obsession with wonder weapons. John Carpenter's They Live made mass surveillance feel normal. And maybe we've run out of futures we can imagine. We'll talk about how science fiction made invisible threats real. Things like mutually assured destruction became stories people could understand and feel. We'll also ask an uncomfortable question. Did science fiction's shift from optimism to pessimism help kill the space age dream? Or does it just reflect where we are as a civilization? If you've ever wondered whether your favorite sci-fi actually influenced the military-industrial complex, stick around. If you want to know why modern stories keep recycling the past instead of imagining new futures, this conversation will give you answers. My name is Jason Kanigan. I'm the founder of Cold Star Technologies, and I wanted to find out what is really going on in space and defense. So I started interviewing experts in the field, and over the past number of years have met with over 150 academics, engineers, business owners, venture capitalists, military, and government officials. I call this effort the Cold Star Project, and it's where you'll ride along with me to find out what is really going on in space and defense. All right, welcome back to the Cold Star Project. We're here with Matt, Feral Historian, who I followed, I think it's over a year. I first contacted you because you mentioned the technology transfer sort of obliquely between the U.S. and the USSR in the late 20s, early 30s. And I was like, oh my God, I did a whole thing on Albert Kahn, the architect responsible for that. Yeah. And we've just kind of talked back and forth ever since. And today, thank you very much for making time.
Oh, definitely. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Much smaller show. I read a lot as a kid. I read less now. I'm more an auditory person, so I find that I listen to audiobooks a lot. But it also means that whenever an episode of yours comes out after I caught the first couple, I'm like, hey, this he's making me think, right? Which is the important thing. I will have recognized a whole bunch of things. We did the Mode in God's Eye you did recently, and that was like one of my favorite real science fiction books, right? With a lot of ideas. And when the Modis get together and take over a human spacesuit and start coming over, the line from one ship to another to invade, it's a terrifying moment the first time you read it. Right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh my gosh. So I wanted to have you on because we often have on this show technologists, military types, business owners in space and defense, that kind of thing. And occasionally I get to have somebody on who's more on the art side. I think of Peter Thorpe, the great artist who was on. He lives in Asheville, and I was like, hey, I'm half an hour away from you. Why don't I go and set up a couple cameras? And he was like, I do not want to appear on camera, so I had to kind of make a sale to get him to appear. But if you folks like this kind of look at space science fiction and that, go check out that video. Maybe I'll link to it in the comments because it's like I hope this one is going to be something unusual, right? So Matt, I had a long time to think about what do I want to talk to this guy about. He's I only know about Sterling and Turtledove because of you. It's those were series that somehow I missed growing up. They were there, but I didn't see them, and maybe they just weren't in the school libraries or something like that.
That could be.
And so there are gaps. But I thought, wow, what about post World War II scientific or science fiction literature? I find I can imagine that it's not only been impacted by world events, and so people start writing about stuff that happened, but also I believe that people have, like, you could see it in Star Trek or something, right? It has anticipated things that have hit the zeitgeist, and then people go and make that happen, or they start viewing the world that way. And so I thought, well, Matt, you're one of the few people, at least who I know, who has seen enough and dug into this stuff publicly enough that I know for sure you will have seen enough that you will have a point of view on this. and we can have an articulate conversation about it. So, thanks again for being here, and I will ask my first question now. All right. Skill testing question. So the first question is about anticipating anxiety, kind of what I was just saying. Like science fiction has often been described as reacting to historical trauma. So something terrible happens and then we write about it. And I think maybe the Soviet novels that you just looked at, the guys who did the Roadside Picnic, right? They wrote
Oh
that,
yeah,
the Doom City, right?
Strugatsky brothers. Yeah.
Which I had actually read. Yay. And also another one from my teenage years called Moscow 2042, which was an absolute ridiculous
No, I
farce.
have not read that one.
Okay. It's kind of silly. Um, when you look at World War II, post-World War II science fiction as a whole, where are some examples of where you see it anticipating this cultural anxiety before the policymakers, militaries, or the public clearly see it and articulate it?
We could probably do the whole show just about this, but two short stories from the post-war period really come to mind that I think kind of capture two big aspects of it. And the first one, in 1951, I think it was,
Hmm.
Arthur C. Clarke wrote a short story called Superiority.
Mm-hmm.
And the premise of it is, for those who haven't read it, that there's an interstellar war and the more powerful side has lost. And it's told from the perspective of one of the chief weapon designers why that happened. And they started out with numerical superiority. They should have won, but they kept trying to push the envelope to get better and better weapon systems, more and more optimized kind of things. And of course, you have a long development process with all of this. You got a lot of bugs to work out, and they end up losing because they had all these brand new hyper advanced weapons that just didn't work when you actually got them into the field, which I think really captures a big part of the post World War II military industrial complex, how things shifted to the defense industry, where it was like, okay, we know if we actually have a war with the Soviets, we're going to destroy all life on this planet, very likely, so we can't do it, but we have to keep building up like we're going to do it. And so the rules for it gradually shift over the 50s and 60s until you get to, where we are today, where it's making a lot of cool stuff, but is it really practical when you
Right.
get into real wartime conditions? And it always kind of makes me think of, World War II with the Sherman tank, where is this the
Mm-hmm.
best tank the United States could have built?
Yeah.
Well, no, but it was really good as a mass-produced, easily maintained bulk thing that you could just keep dropping in there, and there's no way the Germans could keep up. So it was, good enough for the purpose that it was intended for. So okay, collecting my thoughts here
Mm-hmm.
is kind of like bringing that into modern settings. It's like the question I would kind of frame it as, is an F-35 better than an F-16? Well, yes, if you can keep it in the air during sustained wartime conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's just junk sitting there on the ground. We don't really know at present.
Right.
And like
How good
hopefully
is
we'll
it?
never figure it out, but I always think of superiority with
Mm-hmm.
this. And I guess I have a few little notes here, but I'm gonna kind of skip ahead to the next story
Sure.
so we're not stuck on this one all day. The second one that kind of pops into my head, looking at a different aspect of this, is Ray Nelson's 8 o'clock in the Morning from 1963, which a lot of viewers might be more familiar with as the movie They Live by John Carpenter,
Ah.
which I think is a great example of looking at this disconnect between the macro level policies and what's actually best for the people, like the general population, and how you can often get this sense like we're being governed by something that's actively hostile to us. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we've all felt that at some point or another. I know I certainly have. And I find it notable that it was published, I don't remember exactly which month, but it was very close to the Kennedy assassination.
Ah.
And so I always have that kind of linked in my head with how all the stories about the assassination started to churn up very quickly, a lot of them involving CIA involvement with it. And whether or not any of that's true isn't really the issue, because like what really strikes me about it is that there's enough distrust for it to be plausible to so many people is the thing that really matters. It's kind of this breakdown of faith in institutions. And taking those two things together, it's
Hmm.
one of the big aspects, I think, of the post-World War II wars that were fought after that period, and especially if we're looking at Vietnam or War on Terror. There's this twin sense of we don't really know exactly what we're fighting for. And when you introduce all the new weapon systems, we don't really know if they're going to work.
Hmm.
So there's so much uncertainty into it anymore that it feels like that was less so World War II and prior. I mean, you're always going to have some of it, but it's really that the modern period after that, that post-war era where things have gotten so just vague and nebulous.
Yeah, yeah. What are the values? What are I often wonder about this, and I'm going to probably annoy some people here who really want to, and maybe you too, because you've been classified as a libertarian, right? By people who I don't, I've
Well,
never met you, right?
I've
But
been
just by,
classified as a
yeah,
lot of things by people who've never met me.
right. But I often wonder, like, what are we doing on this planet? Like, if your goal is to have a nice glass of wine and a good meal and drive a nice car, go to sleep, I don't know about your goals in life, right? Those are, and yet that's what most people want, it seems,
Mhm.
right? Is comfort.
Yeah.
And I often wonder what would happen. And that's one thing I do like about the 60s space program is it's a very clear goal that draws people towards it, right?
Mhm.
And a whole bunch of sub goals or innovations happen because of that, which then spill over into the society, and you get microwave ovens and other things, right?
Yeah.
That improve the quality of life. But we're doing something, right? And people
Yeah.
could say, well, oh, that's a waste of money, or why don't we help people on the planet first, or whatever. I think it's more important to have the big goal.
Yeah.
But that's me. And I'm thinking, I mean, I'd read Clarke's stuff as a kid.
Mhm.
Childhood's End is a favorite of mine. I didn't like the TV show versions of it. I don't think it transfers very well.
Yeah. It's
But as
hard
a
to
novel,
adapt.
it's really great. And Rendezvous with Rama, of course.
Mhm.
And Childhood's End really makes the goals and future of humanity pointless. Like they just end up in being this psychic herd running around, right? But the story you mentioned, superiority, Colonel Nicholas Moran, the chieftain, the tank colonel,
Oh,
who
yeah.
I waited for 5 years to get back on my
Yeah.
show.
I saw
Uh,
that interview. That was a good one.
right. He was the guy who mentioned superiority to me.
Oh, okay.
So I only read it earlier this year. And so I thought, he's mentioned it, so I better read it, right? And yeah, and it's good. And as you say, it talks about the arms race basically, but one of them is doing the Soviet Union kind of
Mhm.
quality has a or quantity has a quality all of its own. Stalin quote, right? And just
Yeah.
churning out the T-34s or whatever. And the other team, is trying to do the Wunderwaffe and
Yeah.
not getting anywhere. So that's great. And I've been a Carpenter fan forever. Um,
Mhm.
I think in my 20s I really started to appreciate film, and somebody in college made a list of like 100 movies I had to see. And he was a smart guy. His name was Martin. Um, and I mean, this is like 30 years ago now. But I watched them all, right? And so that probably got me into appreciating film and Carpenter and Assault on Precinct 13 and
Oh,
other
yeah.
films other than Halloween, right?
Yeah.
And they live as as Roddy Piper and just the long fight sequence, but the idea that there is a grafted on over society of
Yeah.
alien death people coming here to um put up invisible signs saying like obey and sleep and keeping us passive. It can be believed more and more as time goes on, right?
Yeah.
And you
There are
pair that,
days I have to check my sunglasses. Like,
right, right.
nope, I'm still seeing it when I take them off.
Are these the ones? But yeah, it's a scary story. And then you look at these developments. I follow a guy, Aaron, who runs a channel called Sub Brief, and a number of other things. And he's a former sonar operator
Okay.
on the submarines in the USN, and he will talk about updates in in naval development, and they just canceled a class of ships
Yeah.
because they couldn't figure out what they wanted to make. That's, they had this basic, nice Italian design, but every
Yeah.
time that they, thought, okay, well, there's different cells in there, 100 cells or something like that, right? What are we going to do with this area inside the ship? And they couldn't agree on what they wanted to do. You think about the F-14, which was developed to intercept Russian bombers coming after American carrier
Yeah.
reinforcement fleets, right? Tom Clancy style, going to Europe to reinforce things if everything went to hell in Germany. And with the removal of those kinds of planes, which never got to do their mission, right?
Yeah.
And therefore were no longer needed because they were old and not maintained in that. The operating radius of the Navy has actually shrunk around these carriers. And I don't think people know that, right? We're actually kind
Generally
of
not,
worse
no.
off than we were before, even though
Yeah.
we have these super duper tech things that hopefully will work. But
Yeah.
maybe we'll never get to find out, and hopefully we won't. So I
Yeah.
think that's a
That's what I always
fascinating
think.
place,
That's what
right?
I always think whenever I see somebody writing long articles analyzing the
Mm,
modern Chinese military and all the
hmm.
advances they made in the new equipment. They're like, yep,
Until
they
that
might be
collision
incredibly
happens,
formidable and they
right?
might just fold up. We
Right.
don't know.
Right. Yeah, it's really tough to tell. So, all right. Well, let's move on to the next question, which is centered around this idea of making the invisible comprehensible. So where I'm going with that is after World War II, the world enters this era that's defined by really things you can't wrap your mind around, abstract system level threats. You can't see them, you can't fight them directly. Things like mutually assured destruction for nuclear deterrence, right? Orbital warfare. I Can you see space? I can't, right? I guess if I had a telescope or something, right? Um, and so I want your opinion about whether you see science fiction or not as one of the first cultural tools that help people emotionally process these systems that are so large, like the DoD purchasing system under McNamara, that they couldn't see these things or directly confront them.
Yeah, one thing that I never thought about it in quite those terms
Mm,
before, but that
mm,
basic concept really struck me in the years after 9/11.
mm.
And since then, I kind of think of it in terms of Orwell meets Lovecraft,
Okay.
because there was this whole thing about there's this enemy that can appear anywhere at any time, and we
Hmm.
need this massive state security apparatus so we can stop it. And all these like almost ritualized security procedures. It's like
Hmm.
stand here, walk this way, take your shoes off and go to the bin, stand like this. And it
Hmm.
was like standing there in airports, seeing people go
Uh,
through this whole thing.
uh,
Nah, to ward off the evil terrorists that could appear from anywhere. It was just like,
mm,
okay, well, I've seen these concepts before in dystopian fiction and horror.
mm.
So I know what this is,
Yeah.
but I'd talk to a lot of people who like would either not look at it critically because they didn't have that frame of reference, or look at it purely in terms of policy, which I thought was kind of constraining. So, at least in that particular aspect, I think that kind of reading this kind of fiction can really kind of open up your perceptions to some
Mm,
looking at things on a conceptual level rather than like the nuts and bolts actual physical space workings of it, which can be important sometimes. And let's see, collecting thoughts again here. Do I want to keep riffing on that? Yeah,
sure.
well,
What stories come to mind that hit you? Like Heinlein's The Puppet Masters comes to mind for
mhm.
me about that, where uh, they need to know if you've got this thing on your back, and so
Yeah.
we're going to have nudist societies, to, right? Cults to take care of this, right? So that we could see at all times. I love the movie with Donald Sutherland too. It's a
Yeah,
forgotten little gem.
definitely. Well, like, of course, one thing that comes to mind is Minority Report,
Mm,
with always kind of thinking of that in terms of this profiling and predictive kind of thing. And
mm,
it's like, it's not so much the mechanism for predicting future criminal acts or who's a terrorist or what they're going to strike that's important, so much as this concept of scrutinizing and detaining and in some cases punishing people for what they might do or what they have the capability, but we can't prove the
Yeah.
intent for. And, that's kind of the real issue to it. And I think that science fiction has always been a very good tool for gaming those kind of things out. Because if you tried to have a policy discussion about, you know, predicting who's going to engage in criminal behavior and what to do about it in 1950,
Hmm.
it would sound absolutely insane. But you could write these stories about things and kind of get
Yeah.
people thinking
Well,
about
you
like,
get
what are the
McCarthyism
implications
out of
there?
that.
Yeah, that's true.
Uh,
Then, of course, a lot of
interesting.
people.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Um, it's bad when you get into this predictive stuff, and I'm sure they're
Yeah.
using AI and they've been using racial profiling and camera work for years, right?
Once you
And
get not
not to
quite
mention all of our
reliable.
communications on our phones being tracked
Mhm.
and recorded. And I don't think people know about that either,
And
right?
I'm
The
surprised
Patriot
at how
Act
many people
stuff.
don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
not like it's new.
no, no, and some of the things like that Real ID thing
Mhm.
have been they're Patriot Act things that have been trying to get through for 20 years, right?
Yep.
And have everybody all the different states agree, okay, we're going to do this. So big systems that we can't see and that we have to somehow confront them. What other science fiction comes to mind where this sort of thing happens?
Mhm.
Battlestar Galactica. What a great game of werewolf, right? Just like
Yeah.
the Traitors TV show.
Yeah, that would be a great example. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of what's kind of the definitive one that
Mm,
really crystallizes the whole thing, and I'm not quite sure yet.
Doctor Strangelove.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do a video on that one of these days. I've
Uh-huh.
been meaning to for like 2 years.
Yeah. That'd be fun to talk about too. It's
Yeah,
like
definitely.
process of like how you choose what to work on next and
Uh, yeah, and kind of in the context of some of the Cold War stuff going through the decades until
right.
probably late 80s.
Well, let's try a related question then. About this is the tension between control versus autonomy. So lots
Hmm.
of Cold War and post-Cold War science fiction obsesses over this control versus autonomy, right? Dichotomy. It's like, and I'm writing a book about it right now, actually, because if you get into that OODA loop too much with automation,
Hmm.
you can slide down the road to war really fast
Yeah.
based on a misunderstanding, right? And I don't like that. So so the science fiction is coming back to this tension about automated defense systems, AI decision making, post-human actors, right? Even Karen Sujet from the Homeworld
Mhm.
video game series, right? Is kind of post-human, right? She's plugged into this ship. Um, in your opinion, and what you've seen and read, how much of that came from real military and industrial developments? Yeah, let's start with that, I guess, and then how much of it went on to shape how technologists and defense thinkers approach these problems?
Yeah, it's definitely a feedback loop going there. So trying to untangle what's
Yeah.
causal would probably be
Mm.
dissertation material. Um, One thing that kind of pops out to me about it is, as a key moment, is that shift from long-range strategic bombing to ICBMs, which
Hmm. Okay.
kind of seems to me as one of the biggest moves toward making civilization-ending war something that you can conduct from an air-conditioned room instead of having to actually go out there.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you're not in danger, but somehow there's this disconnect. So instead of flying through enemy air defenses and dropping a bomb on a city below you that you can
Right.
see, you get the order to launch, you assume it's coming from legitimate, correct
Mhm.
channels that have the information that this is the right thing to do. You input it into the machine and then you trust that the automated guidance system is going to get that thing where it's supposed to go and you wait. And so I think kind of compared to that, the more recent things with semi-autonomous drones and algorithmic target analysis and what are fairly small change, that's really been the big. A cat knocked something over upstairs.
Intruder or animal?
Yep, have to like, okay,
You
that
be
was
the
a cat.
judge.
And I also find it noteworthy that in the last few decades, we were kind of touched on this earlier, that a lot of the hardware itself hasn't changed all that much.
Mm,
I mean, we have new fighter aircraft and bombers, but we're still like if we look at Ukraine, it's a particularly interesting example where you have drones and things
hmm.
alongside essentially Cold War era tanks.
Right.
So they
Yeah.
have some upgraded sensor systems and night vision, thermal, better communications, and all of this. That's really where the advances are happening. And I mean, nothing fundamentally has changed with firearms development since the Sturmgewehr.
Right.
So it's
Right.
like we're still using a lot of very old tech as kind of our baseline. And the big changes are all in these sensory systems and information handling and how much work can a given system do by itself,
Mm,
kind of how you led this off
yeah.
with,
Mm,
the real shift now, I think could be the line between warfighters giving commands to machines and letting them act
mm,
versus the machine being able to act autonomously under combat conditions unless explicitly told not to. And that's where things can get out of hand real fast.
hmm. That the spread and use of information and the control or lack of control. For some reason, World War Z, the book, is coming
Mm.
into my head with probably the Battle of Yonkers, with that battle net thing where
Mm.
every soldier's plugged into the system. And so if the panic spread through in the story very fast, right?
Yeah.
But because one group of people was getting obliterated and ripped apart and stuff, and everybody else heard and saw this, and the morale went rock bottom, right? And
Yeah.
so there's an example of a system that should be helpful, but instead it's actually helping the spread of bad news, basically,
Yeah.
and hurting things.
It's
Okay,
like how much information and what
right.
information do people actually
Actually
need to
need.
optimize performance at any given time? Because
Right,
it's not all of it.
right, right. How do you think the reflection of that has come back then to those technologists and defense thinkers? Um, the other thing I'm thinking of is radar installed on
Mhm.
battleships in World War II, where some of the captains were like, "I don't know what this is. I'm not going to use it," right? Which you think is crazy, right?
Yeah.
What
I
what
mean,
comes
yeah.
to mind there?
I mean, the first thing, of course, I'm thinking of is how that attitude was still carrying through, like, well into the 80s with reformers. It's like,
Hmm.
I'll read about some of this stuff, and it's like, what are you even talking about? And, what was it? The A model of the A-10 didn't have any radar in it. And
Hmm.
a few years ago, the assessment report from first Gulf War was out on
Huh.
just how well that worked out, and it was, it's a harrowing read.
Yeah, I gotta
Tried to do
read that.
target
Yeah.
identification just visually flying over the desert. And
Oh.
there were some incidents of A-10s strafing British armored columns and things because
Hmm.
it's like, well, those aren't our tanks.
Right. Oh
I
dear.
don't know what that is. Might be Russian,
Oh.
probably Iraqi stuff. Let's hit it.
I know they had tons and tons of sorties in that
Yeah.
war, very, very quickly, and yeah, thumped them pretty good. But jeez, and that was the first era of night vision with the tanks too, I
Yeah.
think, where they had really good night vision. I was watching oh, the Sum of All Fears, I think, the Sean Bean, Jack Ryan thing, and they were wearing these huge nods out to here, And I was like, oh my gosh, it's first generation. Like, I was at a hotel on the coast for
Yeah.
a pirate festival that came on in the middle of the night. Oh God, that's great. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's another thing that I kind of find interesting about
Mm,
the last few decades, because I can remember when I was a kid, this whole thing of night vision and thermals. This is like
hmm.
sci-fi super soldier stuff. And
Yep.
it's like, and well, I mean, I've got a PBS 14 sitting there on the shelf behind the monitor here.
Right.
Like, there's a thermal that I use around the house to find water pipes and studs behind the drywall. It's
Huh.
like, this is not super tech anymore.
Right. Well, that actually rolls into the next question I have here, which is normalizing the unthinkable. Right?
Hmm.
Science fiction doesn't just imagine new technology; it tries to make it feel normal. And we see this in Star Trek a lot, for example. Um, and in some cases, it becomes inevitable that this thing is going to happen with our communicator, cell phone, TV set
Yeah.
things, all in once. Um, if you got some examples that come to mind where you see science fiction that has made these capabilities emotionally acceptable to the public before they actually exist.
Well, of course, one of the big ones that we're just starting to see the possibility of it actually being a thing is the whole, humanoid robot thing.
Mm,
But I'm going to kind of build up to that and get back
okay.
to that at the end here because
Uh,
something that I've been thinking about ever since I was a little kid, the first time seeing Star Wars, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that saw, the rebel pilots flying those
mm,
X-wings down the trench. After watching this whole movie with these robots walking around making witty banter with each other, wondering, well, why can't you just have robots
mm,
fly the fighters and then you don't have to worry about it? Now we're starting to get into this whole thing with the all the loyal wingman programs and whatnot, where you're going to have these drone
oh,
fighters flying alongside piloted aircraft, assuming it works, because you're
right.
going to have that that curve of finding out things don't. But that really feels like a natural progression to me because that idea was dropped in at such an early age that it's like,
Mm,
well, of course we're going to have this eventually because I mean it's obvious, isn't it?
yeah.
And
Scary though.
yeah, especially if you like how much it's going to rely on AI and how much
Mm,
autonomy you're going to give these things.
yeah.
And,
And it's
you
in
know,
your life. It's
yeah,
not something that can just be easily turned off or put outside or
yeah.
something like that. It is almost like a aggressive pet.
Mhm.
Like, who wants to be helpful, but it's
Yeah,
there and yeah.
yeah,
Oh, you're going to develop a relationship with this thing
yeah,
that doesn't develop a relationship back with you. It develops sensory input and if-then
yeah.
statements, right?
Yep. It's just pattern
Yeah,
recognition. It's not thinking at all.
yeah.
And like yeah, already starting to see people kind of thinking about and in science fiction writing about this whole idea of AI assistance and where that's going to go. And I mean, you could make the case that most of us are already half cyborgs, as with our phones and everything as appendages that we're so reliant on this information, and we use it to keep track of appointments and remember phone numbers. And I know people that can't drive across town without checking the
Mm,
GPS on their phone, which is a
hmm.
little bit alarming.
Right.
And I'm thinking of a while back, I read Ray Naylor's book, The Mountain Under the Sea.
Mm,
And one of the minor elements, kind of in the background of the world building, is a lot of people have these like AI girlfriends, essentially, that
mm.
they call their point five. And the idea of it being that it's like all they really need in a relationship is kind of like this part-time half person that they don't need to actually physically have in their life and deal with all that stuff. They just need some conversation, some affirmation, a little bit of, somebody to talk to periodically, and that's enough for them. They have their point five and they carry on. And there's at one point where one of the characters, you think for the first half or so of the story that they're involved with a real person, and
Mm,
only at about the midway point you realize it's like, oh, it's one of these programs that and I can see that starting to be much more common going forward. I mean, I guess I don't know a whole lot of really young people anymore, but I guess they're starting to have problems with that. But kind of bringing it back to what we're trying to focus on in a military sense,
hmm.
I think it's going to be interesting and potentially scary, not only with the autonomous or semi-autonomous, hopefully, weapon systems, but I can see it both taking the work out of, but also creating a lot more paperwork.
Huh.
And I won't be surprised if we start seeing various agencies creating forms, like AIs writing the forms, and then AI somewhere else filling the things out, and only automated systems ever actually process them. And it starts to become like my wife works in federal grants, and she was just the other day telling me about this big solicitation that went out through the Department of Education. And somebody wrote their proposal like using AI to write big chunks of it. So the reviewer used AI to do the review on it. And both of them strongly believe that the solicitation itself was written heavily with AI content dropped
Hmm.
into it. So it's like we're already starting to get to that point where it's like,
Yeah.
how involved are human beings in this whole process actually? And once you start getting into, you know, combat situations with that, it can get pretty dicey.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, because
But
who came up with the requirements, right?
yeah, it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So where I can see that being really useful, though, is kind of what we were talking about before with the World War Z example, that you could have these systems do a lot of, you know, signal management and cleaning up and prioritizing of transmissions that are coming in. So a
Yeah.
lot of that data processing load could potentially be taken off humans in high stress situations, which could be a good thing,
Hmm.
but it also could lead to some pretty egregious errors because this thing
Right.
is not thinking, it's just reacting to patterns. And if your situation is weird enough, it's going to make erroneous conclusions.
Yeah. I'm
Yep.
doing stuff like that with the logistics companies.
Mm.
Doing for quotations, for example, if everything has been stuck in their email and it's on one guy's computer,
Yeah.
pulling that out into something else like Gemini or something like that, right? Where everyone can see it, and then having the AI either go back to the customer asking, hey, I need more information, or producing a quote and then sticking it into the draft folder of the
Mhm.
guy's email so you can check it, right?
Yeah.
Like you're saying, like let's have the human oversight still. In the military, I don't have that, right? We've had this electronic warfare cat and mouse thing though for
Yeah.
decades, right? Where that has to be done very fast. Those decisions have to be made very fast, and they were made without, large language models.
Yeah.
I would presume. I'd have to ask Will Conley if he'd tell me. He's the guy who was the head of the for DARPA for a while of
No.
EW. Been on the show a couple times and we talked about Freedom's Forge last time he was on. But yeah, talking about that feedback loop, that's so important. I want to stress that because I'm really glad you brought up that phrase. Feedback loops are, in my opinion, the most important and the most misunderstood, the most ignored, the most broken things in businesses that I work
Yeah.
with, that I've seen in the 30 years that I've been in the working, you know, professional workforce, right? After I
Yeah.
got out of delivering pizzas and stuff like that, and reading manual maps back then to figure out where I had to go. And yeah, coming to this. Um, okay. Let's have a look at this idea here of the collapse of destiny.
Mm.
Once again, recurring tensions in post-World War II science fiction. Optimism, inevitability. Optimism, inevitability, right? Uh, Early space age stories talk about expansion. It's manifest destiny basically in space.
Yeah.
Later works, we start getting stagnation, collapse, moral exhaustion, and like I think of Dune for that,
Yeah.
right? Until the transformation um, of the rebellion, right? It's either exciting. Um, and we're landing on new worlds, and we've got our Star Trek TNG apartment block in space, carrying people along to mostly happy conclusions till we encounter things that slice through the ship and kill a few people. But don't worry, they were B plot
Yep.
people, so
We
it
don't know
don't
their
really
names.
matter.
It's okay.
Right, right. So
Never saw them before. Doesn't matter. We'll never
that's
see
right.
them
They're just
again.
people in red uniforms. So, in your opinion, what you've seen, does that mirror a shift, in real geopolitical confidence cycles? Is there such a thing as a confidence cycle, or did science fiction itself help bring some of these forms of optimism to an end?
Yeah. I mean, like, I always can't help thinking of Star Trek in context of Apollo because you
Hmm.
have, your original series and that
Yeah.
optimistic, outward looking, we're
Right.
doing great things streak. And then Apollo kind of fizzles. Okay, we went to the moon. It's the moon. Moon kind of sucks. All right. Well, the money ran out, so I guess we're not going back. End of that. And you start to see in science fiction, it's a slower burn kind of a thing. But I mean, using Star Trek as kind of the backbone example here, it still carried through into next gen, but then into the
Hmm.
90s with Deep Space Nine, you start getting this kind of darker, harder edge to it.
Hmm.
And now we've gotten to the expanse where, like, the expanse,
Right.
where like science fiction is depicting this very gritty kind of miserable future that nobody actually wants to live in. It's just, it's it's got, there's a lot of good stuff in The Expanse. I'm not ragging on the series. I know a lot of
I love
people
the
give me
first
a,
season. I love
yeah,
the first season as real science fiction.
yeah. A lot of people kind of think that I hate that series for some reason. I'm just like, no, I'm saying that it's not aspirational. It's not a
Hmm.
future we want. And it's all probably partly a reaction to, wider political shifts and, you know, distortions, whatever term you want to use to describe
Hmm.
it. That part of it is this collapse of the dream of the space age, and
Mm.
part of it is this broader cultural postmodernist kind of thing where everything has to be deconstructed. And particularly when you get this hard left political edge to it, where it's everything has to be deconstructed in terms of a matrix of oppression and the power
Mm.
structures and how we can flip them around in a more just as defined from a very specific point of view way. But after breaking things down, they don't really have anything new to replace it. So it's just taking these broken pieces and trying to arrange them into something else. And so you end up with these really dreary, almost scolding visions of the future that are like either, see, I told you so, this is what happened, or if you don't start listening to us, this is what's going to happen.
Mm.
And it's like, it doesn't have the same kind of grasp or motivation that a much more optimistic sort of story would.
Hmm.
And like one example of that that is really coming to mind that several people have asked me if I'm going to cover it, and I haven't yet because every time I start reading this book, I end up putting it down. It's Kim Stanley Robinson's Ministry for the Future,
Mm.
which the idea of it is that they create this global governance body that the purpose of it is to treat future generations as though they have the same rights as people that are alive now. So all decisions have to be made in the context of leaving the world better for the future generations instead of stealing from them and leaving them with garbage. But it always comes across as this kind of, you know, technocratic scolding kind of a
Mm.
thing where it's like, well, we know what's best, and so you should do this because obviously we're right. And we can have all kinds of debates about the pros and cons of technocratic top-down central planning, but again, it doesn't really inspire people except for those that are in a position to be the planning
Yeah.
elites.
If you're in it, great.
Yeah, it's like if it means you get to run things, then maybe. But for the rest of us, I'm like, I don't know, I'm not buying this. And I kind of get the same thing with solar punk, where it's cool, but I see the appeal to it, but it's rooted in this idea of stepping back and of doing less, and to me, kind of giving up on
Mm.
like a bolder, more impressive, expansionist kind of a future. And it kind of strikes me on some level as these stories about like the premise is we've come as far as we can. It's all about just tweaking little things now, sort of the
Mm.
end of history sort of approach, which always feels like advocating for humanity just settling into a quiet retirement, which just sounds just absolutely dreadful to me. I'm not really ready for our civilization to go into retirement and wait to die.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's the childhood's end
Yeah.
outcome. Again, they had a world government and
I mean, it's like,
it ended up with mindless, yeah,
yeah,
psychic
starts to make the
birds of
Galactic
people.
Empire look appealing because at least they're still striving for
Right. They're
something, building
trying.
things. And it's like
Right. Right.
they're trying.
This lack of optimism has been going on for a long time. I think the first big crash in our period was the First World War, destroying
Mm,
the Belle Epoque, right? And the optimism of that period, right? Wherever, you have Jules Verne writing To the
no.
Moon uh and these empires and the people in them feeling pretty good about themselves.
Yeah.
and hey, we're learning stuff and we're advancing in medical science and all these other things, right? And then boom, suddenly your social structure gets pulled out from underneath you. Even if you're England, you keep your
Mhm.
monarchy, but your monarchy is given a lot of its power away to the people in exchange for retaining its spot, right?
No.
And since then, yeah, where has the optimism been? Maybe in the 60s a little bit,
Yeah.
right? And then we had
Yeah. It's kind of the tail end of it when it was
yeah,
starting to sour just a little bit.
and then Vietnam
Hmm.
really got things sluggy. I can't speak for Europe because I'm not European. They'll have their
Yeah.
own signposts for this stuff, I'm sure. But with America, yeah, it's been a struggle over here, right? Even with the 60s and the space program and some optimism and that. Still had the Cold War on, and a
Hmm.
heck of a lot of the GDP being dumped back into defense spending, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, people forget about that, right?
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid, people would say, "Hey, we could get 1 or 2% more for NASA in the budget there if we would just not build one destroyer." And nope, we're building the destroyer. Okay, all right. Uh, I guess we got to do something about it.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Well, yeah, that kind of runs into the question about the exhaustion of futures. Then there's an argument that contemporary sci-fi cannibalizes its own past, and it's doing that more and more, recycling Cold War scenarios or Golden Age tropes. Um, we haven't talked about Hyperion, and
Mm.
and that there's a thing with normalized technology of just walking through a doorway and going to another planet, right? The
Yeah.
rest of my house is on another planet. Right? I can just go there. Instead of imagining genuinely new futures, and that's hard to do.
Yeah.
I've been a writer myself. I've written maybe 30, 40 short stories over the years, and it's hard to come up with. I love world building, but it's hard to come up with something truly unique.
I'm
Um,
trying to build some kind of a positive
right.
aspirational future vision is kind of like my white whale with this whole
Mm.
thing. It's like what
Hmm.
I'm hopefully spiraling in towards and
Yeah,
see
yeah.
if I
Well,
actually find it.
you're
But
in a position to do it by looking at all these things and surveying them and go, okay, like you say, flip it over and shake it and see what falls out as part of the quote of your channel, right?
uh,
Um, which would be on the nameplate if it had one. It is hard, and then people will come and criticize it, right?
oh,
And
of
uh,
course.
and and filter
But
it through their
it's
own
like
system and that. But have we run out of futures that we can imagine new ones, or? Are we stuck with these recycled futures and there's something uncomfortable about that we've got to learn.
yeah, yeah, does seem like Fukuyama's end of history is definitely alive and well in science fiction right now. Um, Part of it is that I kind of think of like the 20th century was really weird in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
And now well, I guess rounding out the first quarter of the 21st, it's kind of like we're looking back and we tried a lot of stuff and we went on this radicalism bender and we fought some huge wars over it. And kind of, we don't really remember going to the moon. How did that happen? And like now we're kind of waking up in a puddle of our own vomit trying to figure out what the hell happened. Like
Yeah,
what
yeah.
were we doing and where do we go from here? We've really made a mess of things. And so I kind of wonder if maybe current science fiction's tendency to keep looking back at feudalism or old colonial empires and even Cold War stuff now is as much about longing for this some sense of stability and like something that you can relate to and some some level of social order that's
Hmm.
predictable and importantly competent, even if it's corrupt, as it is about storytelling and how interesting those kind of settings can be. And I guess another part of it would be that if you tried to tell a science fiction story about a stable, well-run, galaxy-spanning liberal democracy not facing any existential crisis, it would probably be kind of like watching C-SPAN. It wouldn't sell very well, but
Mm. Well, I don't know. There's that John Mearsheimer guy who says that every liberal democracy needs to go to war with everything that's not a liberal democracy
well,
to turn it into it, right?
there could be something to that.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of a couple things here then. One is there's a channel called Any Austin. He's a young guy. Um, we both don't know young people anymore, but he's, I try and follow some young people. What If Alt Hist is another one who was
Okay,
introduced
yeah.
to me. Um, and I always find his stuff interesting. But Any Austin looks at, and he's been doing this since he was a teenager. Like it's been a long time that he's been running this channel, and he's settled into this look at video games from a logistics standpoint. So he'll look at
Hmm.
the electrical system of Red Dead Redemption 2 or Grand Theft Auto 5 or something like that,
Yeah.
right? Um, See, like, hey, does this go anywhere? Is this plugged in? Like, how realistic is it? And usually they're pretty good, right? The airports leave a lot to be desired, but at least they tried, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And the most recent one that he put out that's like this was Cyberpunk 20, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's like he spent a day or a week in the game, which I think it's multiple times faster than real life,
Yeah.
right? But living in that world and going and doing a job in a restaurant. And so he would sit at his computer and go and like go to the restaurant and look at the people who were in there, right? The characters who were in there, and they would change, and
Mhm.
have his experience. And like really the question was like, would I want to live here? And of course it's like not really. It's not that great. There's an example of this dystopian future where nobody owns anything. You don't cook. You go and get your food from a box on the wall, vending machine, right? Or a restaurant. And all you do is basically work. And if you go out of your safe downtown area, you're in danger pretty quickly of something bad happening to you out on the outskirts of some industrial area, right?
Yeah.
And it's really fun to watch him do these kinds of things. But no, it's cool, but I really wouldn't want to live in this. Kind of was a neat outcome. So, okay. I realized that I didn't include a question about aliens.
Hmm.
And you've covered some uh book series with elephant type aliens with the
Oh
herd
yeah.
mentality, and you
Footfall,
roll
yeah.
over and put the foot on the stomach, and that's surrender. And we mean it. If we accept that, do that, then we have surrendered. We've got those reptilians, I think. Is that the Sterling one
No,
with
that
it?
was the Turtle Dove
Turtle
series,
Dove.
yeah.
Okay. Where
Yeah,
they
the
where they come
lizards.
in with advanced technology. And yeah, that's you know, how has the other um been shown up in sci-fi that you've seen, and are they important, or are they just humans in disguise with maybe some different operating system rules?
Yeah, it seems like usually they're a stand-in for some kind of a human thing, which I think could be, important
Hmm.
for storytelling purposes and kind of get at some ideas. I mean, it's a great way. Science fiction is kind of the way that you can talk about contemporary political issues that are very sensitive, hot button kind of things in a way that kind of slip past people's filters. And once you get that foot through, it's like, okay, you figured out what I'm talking about, but now
Hmm.
I've hooked you with the story. So now we can
Hmm.
start to kind of examine these ideas, which increasingly just in straight up political conversation has often become nearly impossible,
Hmm.
unfortunately. I know I've lost friends over
Sure.
just calling them on some bullshit, but
Yeah.
there we are.
Well, if it's tied into their identity, it's going to be a tough
Yeah,
slog,
it's
right? It's hooked in there pretty good. And if they're
yeah,
unaware, right,
yeah,
then they won't take a look at it. You know,
yeah. That's kind of
you
the
call me
thing.
on
But
some BS, I might get mad, but I'll take a look at it, right?
yeah,
And I'll, assess it
it's
with you. But
it's certainly not unprecedented that people have called me on stuff, and I've looked
yeah,
into it and been like, okay, yeah, you're right.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I just walked along absorbing that and
Yeah,
accepting it for years, and then now, okay, I'm taking a critical look at it. And you know
yeah.
what? Yeah, I need to change my view on that.
Yeah.
Of course, everyone likes to believe that they're rational, but
Well, of
we're
course.
all not. We're all chimps
Yes. We all have our
in our
moments of
chimp
just,
society. So
but
the I'm thinking of Stranger in a Strange Land, the
mm,
Heinlein novel, Valentine Michael Smith, and the opening is very alien to that book with threes and threes and threes, and you're like, what the hell is going on? What am I reading the first time you read it? And then there is
yeah,
that inflection point basically where you're like, okay, I'm in the rail car now and I understand what's going on and what they're talking
yeah,
about, and then you go on from there. Um, so that was a good example, I thought. And then the second time you come to it, you're like, ah, yeah,
yeah,
I understand what they're talking about here, right? As long as you
yeah.
read it without a decade in between, you're
Yeah.
not going to quite forget.
Yeah, well,
So,
that's one of the things where when they try to do genuinely alien
yeah.
aliens that is really interesting
Hmm.
because I mean Footfall's kind of in that middle ground there,
Hmm.
but I'm thinking of what was it that movie The Arrival, I think it was called
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the
the squid
yeah, and they were trying
guys.
to work out
Yeah.
the language of it and
Right,
things
right.
where it's
Yeah.
like you're spending so much time trying to like, okay, I can't just have a conversation with this thing. It's not a question of,
Hmm.
figuring out their vocabulary. It's a completely different way of thinking.
Yeah, the symbolism,
Yeah,
right?
once you get into that kind of like, okay, I have to set aside what I know and try to figure out what this is, I think that can actually be a really valuable thing on a
Hmm.
cultural level to kind of have people exposed to things where you have to do that.
Yeah, even among humans,
Yeah.
our different societies have different symbols and values and development levels. I've studied spiral dynamics for many
Mm.
years, which is very very useful. It's been very very useful, combined with a couple other personal individual assessment tools.
Mhm.
And so you really get a good idea of like, okay, I'm not going to get at this person with green values or something like that, right?
Yeah.
The hippie values. I remember when I first saw that the hippies were above the business people in that model. I was
Mm.
like, I don't like it, but it's true. Darn it. I've known this for a long time in my gut. Darn it.
Yeah.
And then you start thinking about, okay, where do I need to go? All right. Well, let's wrap up with a couple questions about your channel, I guess. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
Feral Historian.
Yeah.
People can go there on YouTube. Is there anywhere else online that people should look? I guess Rumble.
Yeah, I try to
That's your
duplicate stuff
backup.
over there for, yeah, the
Yeah.
inevitable cancellation on YouTube
Right.
that, sooner or later it's gonna happen. And a sporadic presence on X.
Mhm.
And yeah, I have a book out on
Ah.
Amazon called Ninty's Gate, and I'm in the editing phase on the second one in that series, which is actually the first one I wrote, the real story.
Hmm.
Ninty's Gate is kind of an expanded prologue.
Okay. Yeah. I'll have to check that out. I can leave a link in the description to that on Amazon as well. How do you choose what you're going to look at? I remember Dr. Jonathan McDowell, the Harvard Smithsonian guy, was on. He's been on a couple times, and the last time we were the James Webb Space Telescope had
Mm.
recently been launched and seen some things, and so I was like, okay, we'll come back. And it just struck me in the middle of the episode. I was like, how do you guys pick what the missions are? Like which way you point this thing and what it looks like. And I thought, why hasn't that struck me before, right? And
Yeah.
it's not a question that people think of or ask. And apparently a bunch of scientists go into a little room and vote on it. So the question is, how do you get into that room, right?
Yeah.
Um, but how do you pick and get your calendar going? Because you have such a rapid development pace too. It really is impressive. Like I can't I can't produce the way you do, right? I can't do something every week, that has the production value. I have to go at my own pace, right? But how does that calendar look for you? How do you know, ah, this is what I need to look at next? And is there kind of a direction that you're going in, or is it like a smorgasbord, like, oh, the sweet and sour ribs are interesting. Oh, I like that rice.
It is absolute chaos.
Okay.
It's yeah, just the common thread is I only talk about things that I think are cool and interesting in
Hmm.
some way, which doesn't necessarily mean I think it's good.
Hmm.
Because there have been a few things where it's like, I think this show is overall bad. However, it's got this really interesting element to it that's worth talking about. And yeah, the pace has been kind of insane. I don't know how I manage that. It's partly insomnia, I guess. And
I know it well.
yeah, I suspect it's going to slow down some in the coming year.
Okay. Okay. Well, I hope people
But
go over there and I'll link to that in the description definitely. But you can all type out Feral Historian in your YouTube search bar and go check that out. Mac, thanks a lot for making time to do this. I
oh,
really, really
absolutely.
appreciate it, especially for a dinky little channel like mine.
Hey,
It was fun to
was
have a
there not
really
that long
intelligent
ago.
conversation about something that isn't super technical. Right,
Mhm.
we were able to look at some things in the
Yeah.
defense, field and military and that, but
Yep.
not the
Spent some time in
the
the technical
lights.
fields,
Yep.
but I'm much more squishy humanities guy.
Right. All right. Well, thanks a lot for being here.
Yep. Thanks for having me on.
Before we wrap up, a big thank you to Matt, aka the Feral Historian. If you want deeper context on space defense, how past decisions echo forward, his channel is essential viewing. You'll find the link below in the description. And if you're a president or CEO watching this, listening to this, there is something to consider. If you are facing decisions that can't be undone, market entries, major hires, automation bets, restructures, and you're relying on secondhand reports or partial data, that is a risky place to be. If you want an honest check on whether you're dealing with the kind of complexity that benefits from outside perspective, you can take the Executive Clarity Assessment at coldstartech.com/assessment. It's private, it's direct, and it's designed to tell you whether you actually need help or whether you're fine handling it internally. I hate quizzes that are fake, right? They're made to, oh, everyone qualifies, right? This quiz does not. This assessment does not do that. This assessment looks at where you are with you and determines whether you would really benefit from an outside perspective or whether you can handle it internally. It will tell you, no, you're fine, if that's the case. All right, thanks for watching. This is Jason Kanigan, founder of Cold Star Technologies and host of this show, The Cold Star Project. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.